My dad told me he'd never walk me down the aisle because I wasn't the daughter he wanted, so I placed him in the back row. When I was 12, my father told me he had always wanted a son. He said it casually, over dinner, like he was discussing the weather. I remember sitting there with my fork frozen midair while my mother scolded him, but he just shrugged and added, "Boys carry the family name, girls are just a liability." Those words carved themselves into me. From that day on, I knew where I stood in his world. Beneath the pedestal he reserved for the son he never had, over the years, he never missed a chance to remind me, when I brought home straight A's, he said, "Imagine what a boy could have done with that brain." When I got a scholarship to college, he muttered, "Too bad you'll just waste it when you get married." And when I told him about my first job offer, he looked at me like I'd spoken nonsense. "A daughter's success doesn't matter," he said. "It's not like you'll be supporting this family." So when I got engaged, I didn't expect him to celebrate, but I wasn't prepared for the cruelty that followed. We were in the living room, my fiancé beside me, his hand warm over mine. As I told my parents the news, my mom gasped, beaming, hugging me tightly. My father didn't move. He stared at me for a long moment, then said flatly, "Don't look at me to walk you down the aisle. You're not the daughter I wanted." The silence afterward was suffocating. My fiancé stiffened beside me, ready to speak, but I squeezed his hand. I wouldn't let my father steal another moment from me. Instead, I smiled, nodded, and excused myself from the room, but inside, I was burning. That night, I called the one man who had quietly been my anchor all these years, my stepdad, Mark. He married my mom when I was 16. After my parents' marriage finally collapsed under the weight of my father's bitterness, Mark was gentle where my father was harsh, steady where he was reckless. He never tried to replace my dad, but he was the one who proofread my college essays, showed me how to change a tire, and picked me up from the airport when I moved back home after school. When I asked him if he would walk me down the aisle, there was a pause on the phone, then his voice broke. It would be the greatest honor of my life. From then on, I didn't think about my father. I poured myself into planning a wedding that reflected me and the man I loved. My father was invited, my mom insisted, and I didn't want to start a war, but I made no effort to include him beyond that. He didn't pay a cent, didn't offer any help, didn't ask a single question. For months, I didn't hear a word from him. The day of the wedding came, and I felt radiant, wrapped in lace and love. As the music swelled and the doors opened, I looked to my right. There was Mark, standing tall in his suit, tears glistening in his eyes. He offered his arm, and I took it without hesitation. The guests rose, and together we walked toward my future. Halfway down the aisle, I caught sight of my father in the back row. He was sitting alone, arms crossed, face stormy. He wasn't in the front where parents usually sat. He hadn't earned the seat. I had made sure of that. My father's punishment was to watch from the shadows as another man gave his daughter away. At the altar, Mark squeezed my hand before placing it gently into my fiancé's. His voice cracked as he said, "Take care of her." It was all the fatherly blessing I needed. The ceremony was perfect, and when I turned to face the crowd as a married woman, my father was nowhere to be seen. He had slipped out, unable to stomach the reality that I had found love, joy, and family without him. Later that evening, as the reception buzzed with laughter and clinking glasses, my mom pulled me aside. She hugged me tightly and whispered, "He told me once he thought you'd never make it in life without his approval. Tonight, you proved him wrong." I smiled through tears. For years, I had carried the weight of his rejection, the sting of never being the daughter he wanted. But as I looked around at the people celebrating with me, my husband, my mom, my stepdad, my friends, I realized something powerful. I didn't need his approval. I never had.